Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. We'll get started in a minute. Uh, while everyone joins, I want to quickly tell you about Nightwatch Release walkthrough. Now, you might have seen TV shows or sitcoms being recorded in front of a live audience. That is very close to what we are trying to do here. While we record demos for the new feature releases, we want to let people join in, ask their questions, and talk to the people who are maintaining the Nightwatch project. Also, we are trying to do something new today. We are trying to do a lightning version of our demos, which will be much faster. So it's slightly different from what we have done in our previous release walkthrough. So do let us know which version do you prefer, this one or the previous one. I guess people are in and joining in right now, so we can get started. Welcome everyone to Nightwatch Release Walkthrough. My name is Nimish and I'll be your host for today's event. I have been a part of BrowserStack's product marketing team for the past 3 years and have worked with our visual and automated testing products in the past. Let me also introduce our panelists today. First and foremost, we have a very special guest with us, one of our most prominent contributors, David Mello. David has built a lot of plugins for Nightwatch and is a very active member in our Discord community. Uh, really appreciate, David, you taking time out for this one, and thanks for joining the event.
My
Uh, we,
pleasure.
al- we also have Weber Singh with us today, who is a software engineer at the Nightwatch project. And we also have Vishal Shah, who is the product manager for Nightwatch. We'll also hear from Binayak today, who's a senior software engineer at Nightwatch. And finally, we have David Burns, the head of open source at BrowserStack. And he's also a core contributor to the Selenium project and a chair for the W3C browser testing and tools working group. All right, let's move to the agenda for today. Uh, we have a packed one. We'll start off with our VS Code extension and then move on to accessibility testing with Axe. Next, we have added a lot of new extensions with this new release, and we'll cover them in today's session. Then there are updates to the create-nightwatch project with default parallelism. And we'll end with what's coming in the next release and Q&A towards the end. So if you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to add them in the Q&A section in Zoom. You can find it towards the bottom of your Zoom uh, window. All right, let's start with our VS Code extension for Nightwatch. Over to you, Weber.
Thank you, Nimish. So before starting it, um, Nimish, can you share the screen?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So before starting like my demo, so I wanted to answer a few of the questions like why we went ahead with VS Code extension, why we built it in the very first place. So as of now, users who are using Nightwatch and writing their tests, so whenever they write the test and they have to run it or debug it, they have to switch context, and we don't want it. We want the best developer experience around Nightwatch. So that's why we build VS Code extension so that they can easily run and debug test in a single click, and they can always get the results and everything in the VS Code itself. So they don't need to switch context. So Nims, can you go to the next screen? So let's start with demo. And let me share my screen. So I would start with an empty project. So let's create a new folder called demo and open VS Code. So before that, if any of you don't know how to install extension, so in VS Code, if you can see the left side of the window, there's an extension icon. If you click on it and search for Nightwatch, you will see the extension right here. Right now, it's in pre-release mode. So what pre-release meant is that there might be bugs and there might be issues which we are fixing it. So to install a pre-release, what you need to do is that beside the install button, you have a drop down. Click on it and click on install pre-release version, because there's no release version exist yet. So because we have only released pre-release version. When I click on it, extension is installed, and there are numerous ways you can activate the extension. So because extension is installed and you can see nothing happened. So to activate an extension, there are two ways. So first one is like using a command prompt, which is using Command Shift P. Then you will get a command prompt window, the VS Code, and then you can search for Nightwatch, and you can see there are four commands available: install Nightwatch, run test, debug test, and run all test. So these are the activation points. So whenever you use one of these commands, the extension get activated in the VS Code editor context. The second is that if you are existing user of Nightwatch, so you might have nightwatch.com.js file, or maybe nightwatch.json file if you are an old user. So I am as an extension, it will detect automatically and activate it for you. So you don't need to activate it. So because this is a fresh project and we don't have anything, we'll go ahead with the very first command, which is an install Nightwatch command. And let's use Google Chrome. Yes, okay. What it will does is that it will quickly use npm init tool to quickly initiate the project and install necessary files like Nightwatch, Chrome driver, Gecko driver, whatever driver you have selected in the previous questionnaire. And it will also scaffold different test files for you so that you can test your Nightwatch right away. So you can see all my files are present. Let's close it. And if you see that there's a new icon came up, which is a text explorer icon, which is what you will see when extension get activated. And if you click down it, and you will see that all your tests will be listed down here. So and all those tests, if you click on it, and you will see this nice little button you can use to run your test. So right now, what I will do is like quickly run all the tests. So this is the button you can use to run all your tests, and you can see it is running all the test. And you can see all the status right away. And like because all the test is passed, so there's no failure right now. But if you let's introduce a failure. So let's go this to a Ecosia.js file and random, because it will never assert. And let's run this file. As you can see, because we have changed the assertion syntax, and it gave me the error, the failure message as well as the stack trace. And this is a nice little error pop-up. This will help you to debug faster because whenever the error happens. And there's another thing which we introduced in VS Code, which is apart from running a test, is the debug test. So for that, I will go ahead and create a new file. Let's name it as copy.js and paste it. And if you go here, um, here it is, our new file, and let's add a breakpoint here. And right, there's a debug button here itself, and also you can access the debug button from here. So so for that you need to right click, and there's a run test, there's a debug test, and there's a reveal in test explorer also. So you can see where your test lies. So let's debug test. Let's click on debug icon, and let's arrange the window. And you can see that there's nothing to display because we have literally stop our debugger at the very first line. And when I click on the next, it will uh, load the test, and it will do like whatever the test is intended to. Right now, it is just navigating the test. And let's go ahead with like the test flow. And you can see whatever I am like whenever I'm forwarding the debugger item using the step over, then my test is being seen. Like you can see what the status of this test is. So you can easily see like where the error lies into when you are writing your E2E test. So let's stop it. And there is also a view test button. So whenever you run your test, right? So let's run my test again. And so you can see right now there's no assertion. So you can see there's no assertion ran, but you can always view your test result. So that's all.
Great. Thanks a lot, Vaibhav. As Vaibhav mentioned, if you want to know more about this extension, you can check it out at the VS Code Marketplace. Or if you already have a Nightwatch a conf file installed, it'll auto activate. Okay, let's move on to accessibility testing now. David Mello, the man himself who's built this, is here with us. Over to you, David.
All right, let me find my share button again. My share button's gone away. That's weird though, seriously though. Is that oh, found it, sorry.
No worries.
All right. Yes, so accessibility testing, it's a great feature to have in your automated testing framework. This was an extension that I added to Nightwatch some time ago, but it was recently added as a default plugin, which is really cool because you get it automatically as a part of the framework. So this, you know, in a testing flow, this works really well because what I typically recommend to my teams is that when you're doing the initial development, you can use the Axe plugin in your browser to do your exploratory testing to make sure that, you know, while you're doing that testing, any kind of issues that are discovered can be conveyed to the dev team while it's being developed. But the tricky thing about, you know, accessibility especially is that it's not always immediately obvious that there's an accessibility issue. So further development down the line could introduce regressions, which are easily missed unless you're actually continuously scanning for them. So that's where Nightwatch comes into play with this plugin. You can back, you know, kind of like just make sure that your back's protected by in your CI running these accessibility tests so that you're notified immediately if any regressions try to sneak in. So let me do a quick demo here of what we have. All right, so I have it in like 3 flavors to kind of show you the different options that are available. So here's a very simple test. I have it set to go to a page object that's just loading this demo site on w3.org that shows you a site full of accessibility violations. So version 1 of the test just shows how you would instantiate and run the Axe tool. So this is all very similar. This is how you would navigate to a URL in your page object. So at this point, the test has navigated to that W3 site. And then to load the queue Axe API, you call .axe inject. And then to actually run the accessibility assertions, you call Axe run. And it can take pretty much just two parameters optionally. So the first one is going to be your scope selector. So any CSS you give here is where the accessibility assertions are going to run against. So for example, if you did the body, it's going to check all the items cascaded through the body. And we'll run that test now. And the handy thing about this tool is it doesn't stop on the first assertion, so that when you're trying to come up with a punch list of things that you need to address for your dev team, you know what's working and what isn't. And so here, there's like 90 or so Axe rules, and it'll run whatever is applicable to the DOM elements that were scanned. So if you're looking for like image alt text, that's not going to apply to like a text box, for example. So that rule wouldn't get run against that. So some of the handy output here is it lets you know what rules were run and the number of elements that were checked against, kind of as a sanity thing. So you can see all the past rules. So, we're avoiding inline spacing. The color contrast looks good on this site. We know that 75 elements were evaluated. And this is another kind of gut check to make sure that your CSS selector is actually scanning what you're thinking. So you're not just getting like a green pass and you're not actually looking at anything. So into the assertion errors, you can see that it identifies what's currently being violated. So this particular image, this border left top GIF, does not have alt text, which is not good for screen readers, for example. And it goes down into the rest of the site. Now, the tricky part is when you're starting with a site that hasn't really been developed with accessibility in mind, you're going to have to kind of come up with some compromises probably initially. You can't fix everything all at once. So you might come up with a plan to tackle certain things. So maybe you start to enable certain rules selectively that you enforce, and then you increasingly add to that list over time. So there's a couple ways to do that. The second parameter you can give it is an object consisting of the applicable acts rules that you would like to either run or disable. So for example, this, color contrast can be difficult to get right, and maybe your UI team doesn't want to tackle that right off the go, and you want to just shut off that noise. So you can choose to set the enabled property to false on that one, and just to show you that you can set others as well. We've also disabled region in this test. So if I rerun this test with v2, you should notice that if we scan through, we shouldn't have any violations around color contrast. So we just have images must have alternate text and so on. All right, and now lastly at v3, this would show you how to selectively run specific rules. So it just depends on like where your balance is. Like if you have more rules that you want to disable versus less rules you want to run kind of thing, you can choose to disable selectively or run selectively. So that's where run only comes in. You can say, like in this case, I'm only checking color contrast and image alt. So just as a comparison, so 44 assertions failed on the v2 test. If I run it as v3 with just 2 rules to check, we're down to 39 because only the alt text is being violated. And I think color contrast was passing before, so that one's okay. And then lastly, just as a style thing, I'm kind of like just doing big bang approaches right now on like the entire body. And this isn't as maybe readable in certain ways. So to show you some other ways you can style your test suite, you can give it helpful names and then maybe scope these things a little bit better. So, if this was like a true accessibility test suite, perhaps you'd have something like, a test that says page should have a descriptive title, and you could use like a native Nightwatch assert for that and just make sure that it has a title that makes sense. But then, for example, you can do something like main logo has alt text, and that text would only be scanning for image alt, and maybe that's a little bit more readable in your output if there is a failure. In that case, you can do something like maybe perhaps the news page has accessible headers, and that is actually a combination of like 4 different rules on the Q site. So I'm combining those here. Similarly, you could define a certain rule set that deals with keyboard friendliness. So I've matched the ones that deal with that sort of thing into this. And this last one here that I have commented out shows that you can also go by tags, and they have this concept. So like there's everything that would be like a category keyboard, for example, would be evaluated. And there's a lot, like I said, as far as rules. They publish it on their rule descriptions markdown file on the Q GitHub. So these all correspond to these rule IDs, these things I've been showing you here. And the tags are here. And it's also nice because it shows you their impact. So if you're trying to address, this most severe ones first, you can see that, we have critical and serious and so on, or you maybe don't deal with things that are moderate right off the get-go type of thing. You can also choose what level of the WCAG standard to use based on tags as well. And there's further explanation on their proper site as far as what sort of properties you can specify. So run only rules and so on. So that's pretty much it there. And I'm really excited that this was added as a default plugin so everyone gets to enjoy it.
Great. Thanks a lot, David, for building this plugin and
Sure.
also your contributions to the Nightwatch project. Thank you. We'll now move on from David Mello to David Burns. Can I share my screen, David?
Yep, go ahead, take control.
Sure. Okay, yes. Over to you, David.
So here at Nightwatch, we've been trying to kind of make sure that we support everything that you want to be doing and try to give you the best experience with giving you the most amount of flexibility. So recently we've added a whole bunch of work that we've done to kind of reporters, where we've shown how you can use Mock Awesome and Allure. There's brand new documentation on our website, as well as integrations with Slack and documentation around TeamCity. We've done a huge amount of work around making sure that people can use their favorite CI pipeline from Jenkins to Azure to Circle CI, GitHub Actions, and Bamboo CI. So with that, you should hopefully be able to just take the documentation, get running, and be very quick in what we're doing. The same with test runners. We know that everyone wants to run their tests in their way, and with Nightwatch, we give you the kind of the bare bones and then allow you to kind of extend it out as you need. So with version 2, we brought in Cucumber.js, but we've always been improving that. We've always supported Mocha, and we've been doing a number of improvements for Ava and Jest. And then finally, we always know that kind of people can't always have their own Selenium grids. So there is brand new documentation around how to get started with cloud providers like BrowserStack and Source Labs, so that you can easily scale up your tests and take them to where you need to. So hopefully you can use these integrations. If you come across any problems or you wish there was kind of changes that you want to do, please either raise an issue on our GitHub. We will get to it as soon as possible, or come and chat to us on our Discord server.
Okay. For this section, we'll have Binayak cover the changes to the create-nightwatch project and how it enables parallelism by default going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Nimish. So parallelism has always been there in Nightwatch, but you had to proactively enable it if you wanted to use it. So what going forward we are doing now is enabling parallelism by default for new users. So anybody who is using create-nightwatch to create a new Nightwatch project, or anybody who is installing Nightwatch afresh without a config file, they will get parallelism enabled by default. You obviously have ways to disable that. And with that, we are also adding support for running multiple environments in parallel. So it was kind of running in parallel before, but not running tests parallelly in both environments. So we now have added support for that. And yeah, that's about it. And I'd like to show you a demo of running multiple tests in multiple environments in parallel. Let me share the screen. Okay. So what I am trying to do is run Nightwatch in both Chrome and Firefox and run both these tests parallelly in both the browsers. So hopefully it creates, as you can see, it creates 4 processes and spawns up the windows and runs this test one by one in parallel. And as you can see, all the 4 tests passed in separate browsers simultaneously. So hopefully that will make things faster for everybody. And just to show the create-nightwatch changes. So if you now install Nightwatch afresh, it'll take some time. That also is slower than usual. So now that fresh Nightwatch installation has been done, now if you try to run the example tests, what will happen is it will run all of them in parallel. So as you can see again, multiple instances of the browser are spawned and everything runs simultaneously. And since it is now the default, so we have made fixes to the logs, a few tweaks to them so that the reports are easily readable on the console. Also, if you want, you can use the old way of running this by adding a sequential parallelism. And it will run your test like it used to run before. So we are keeping backward compatibility with this, so nothing breaks unexpectedly. So that's about it. So in this case, just to clarify, 2 environments ran, but ran test sequentially in those 2 instead of running all of them in parallel. Yep, that's it from my side.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Binayak. Now, these were the few new features we saw in this release walkthrough. We saw updates to our create-nightwatch project. We saw the new VS Code integration, accessibility testing with Axe, and a lot of new integrations with this release. Now, let's hear from David Burns about what we can expect from the next release.
Thanks, Nimish. The next release is actually going to be what I think fairly exciting. We've been working on a number of features around improving component testing. So for those who don't know, component testing is taking a small component from your favorite front-end framework and allowing you to kind of run tests in multiple browsers against just the components. This is useful for visual testing, for functional testing and things like that. And since it's only testing smaller parts, as we all know, doing integration tests instead of end-to-end tests removes a bunch of flakiness. We know that you can improve that. So there's going to be more front-end framework support coming along. And hopefully we've also got another very cool feature that not ready to fully announce what it's going to be, but it's around component testing that kind of hopefully will be able to give your designers, your front-end developers, and the QA teams the best support in getting this done. Going on from there, we've also been working on mobile browser support for emulators and real devices. We at BrowserStack know that kind of, especially after the pandemic, there's been a huge shift in a number of companies moving to mobile. And so we want to make sure that, like, Nightwatch's plan is always to try be where your customers are. And so we want to make sure that we're giving you the support that you need. And so in the next couple of releases, we're going to be adding some fantastic mobile browser support. This is not going to require like extra things like Appium will hopefully be able to do this fairly simply and allow you to be able to move on and test your websites at either emulators, or if you want to use a real device, you'll be able to use those real devices where possible. And as I mentioned, like in the component testing section, we've been trying to focus on making sure that life is easier for everyone. And like from your designers to your front-end engineers to kind of your esthets. We're also going to be seeing about how we can kind of improve testing at all levels. So if you want to run your unit tests with Nightwatch, you should be able to do that. We will be the kind of the framework that allows you to kind of run that. You can already do it now, but it's not always obvious how to do it. So we're going to improve documentation, things like that. And so we'll go through all these different sections of kind of testing so that you can kind of feel confident and you don't need to go, oh, how do I use this tool? How do I use that tool? Nightwatch is going to kind of just help you move through it. So you can just have one command that just figures out what needs doing. And then finally, like in previous like videos and blog posts and things like that, we've talked about like what we've added to the Chrome, like we've created the Chrome recorder. I've talked about the Visual Studio Code extension so that you can run and debug things like that. We're going to be spending some time improving and iterating over the tools that we've created in that space, so that you can easily go from having no repository to running tests, and like tests that you've created, not just the example tests that you've created in under 10 minutes. And so you can do that quite quickly. So we're going to be improving all of that process so that you can kind of go, I've created the test while I've been doing my exploratory testing. Here it is. And here I've created an automated test that I can put in my CI, and I can move on to new tests. As we know from like people like Marit, who's a phenomenal QA engineer, is that the more time you spend in automation, that gives you more time to do exploratory testing, that gives you more time to do automation. It's this beautiful cycle if you get it going. So it's going to be really awesome. And that's kind of what's helped us focus our engineering efforts and our product management efforts moving forward, is how do we support everyone in the space in the same way, so that they can have the confidence in creating great software. And that's it for what's coming up next.
Great. Thanks a lot, David, for walking us through the planned release. We'll now move on to Q&A. Now, your questions could be about the recent releases. It could be anything Nightwatch. Please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A section in Zoom. I'll just stop my screen share. Yeah, please add your questions in the Q&A section. While others add their questions, I think one question I had for David Mello was around accessibility testing itself. Like this journey, like we've been implementing accessibility. We've done that in the past at DollarStack, and we've seen this project become really huge over time, right? It's a big undertaking. For teams starting with this, like, and you showed, right, there are so many rules, so many versions of, how would you recommend like teams go ahead with this, like taking those steps? Where do they get started, and how do they avoid this becoming a big project that never happens, right? So how do you stop from getting into that space?
Yeah, that's a big struggle. It's a little bit easier if you are developing net new with that as a requirement of all your stories, and it should be like going forward if it hasn't been. But if you have an existing product or existing site and then you're just like, make it accessible, that's a lot of stories that aren't really, tangible necessarily. So you have to treat them like any other feature release, in my opinion, where you kind of have to figure out who your users are and who you're designing for. And you need to make some decisions about, because you can't do it all at once. That's impossible. So you got to split it up into maybe like figure out if you're a company and there's like specific users that have certain accessibility needs, you can design for them initially. And then that might be a model for an internal site where you can control your users more, but it's less of a luxury because you have to build for everyone, especially if it's a public site. So,
Right.
you know, what are you doing to move the ball forward? So at some point you just have to pick what it's going to be. So kind of like I showed, maybe you pick something like screen reader friendliness. So you can look in the list of the DQ rules and see what categorically would be accessibility rules that you'd need to conform to make your site more accessible for screen readers. And that can be, you know, a feature release. So you can, you know, set up your automation suite to, you know, go to those rules and, you know, get that release through, make it accessible for that aspect of it. Back yourself, like I said, with your regression suite now covering those things so it doesn't sneak in behind you again, and then move on to the next thing. You know, so I would go for, you know, what would get the biggest impact earliest. And, you know, a lot of that, you know, you can get from, like I said, it's easier when you know your user groups internally. Sometimes you can get that from some analytics and that sort of thing. And then some just studies out there on, you know, what are more common accessibility, you know, issues out there, so that you can, you know, have the biggest impact for the greatest amount of users initially, and then, you know, work it like any other kind of feature that would make sense, in my opinion.
Got it. Thanks a lot, David.
Mhm.
I think we have a comment from Harley, not really a question, just want to say can't wait to start using VS Code extension and accessibility plugin. Great, we're excited that you liked this. Anything else, like any other ideas, if you have, like, feel free to reach out to us on Discord, or if you come across any issues, you can like put it on our GitHub project. And yeah, I'll just share, like, yeah, these are the different methods that you can use to reach out to us. And we have recently started our YouTube channel, Nightwatch.js. So the recording of this webinar will also be there. And if you want to get a monthly update of whatever has happened in the Nightwatch project, you can put in your email in our Substack, and we'll just disturb you once a month, and you'll get everything that you want to know about Nightwatch. So that's it from us in today's Nightwatch release walkthrough. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of the day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.